Hey everybody, it's John, otherwise known as a history buff. Don't forget to subscribe if you get a chance. This video was sent to me. It's not necessarily history, but I think it's worth looking at. It looks like it's a little outdated because I guess I'm going to make just a quick prediction. Just because of the war in the Ukraine, I think it sort of gave us an eye-opening as to different kinds of soldiers. So let's take a look.
It's 2025, and after a strange
the different kind of ways militaries are set up, and what we have lots of, what we don't have lots of. But it'll be interesting in that context.
shift in geopolitics and world powers, the USA and the UK have found themselves going to war with each other. These longtime allies that once fought side by side in World War II in Afghanistan have become arch enemies fighting for global dominance. The rest of the world looks on in horror. But who will win? There's one fact that's hard to ignore. One side is larger than the other by a long way: the United States. Based on size alone, the US military is the clear winner. It boasts over 1.4 million personnel, compared with a measly 149,000 in the UK. That might not guarantee.
I don't like the condescending attitude of this person. Like, I honestly, since I've done this channel, I've come to respect a lot more about Brits, and I think this is, what's it called, Knowledgeia or knowledge something, kind of like infographics, but I don't like the way they do this. I don't think that's appropriate.
Success if the whole US Army consists of untrained airheads and idiots, but it doesn't hurt.
Oh, fair enough.
Especially when you consider the amount the US spends. The American military budget is a huge $740 billion compared with the UK's much smaller $49 billion. How cute. Money can't buy you everything in life, but it helps to win wars. But to be fair, both countries take their military spending seriously. In terms of GDP, the USA spends 3.4% on the military, and the UK spends around 1.7%. That figure won't help the Brits win a war, but it's something they can nurse their national egos with. So far, things aren't looking good for the Brits. They've been outnumbered and outspent. Let's see if they can turn things around with their equipment. As they say, it's not all about the size, it's about how you use it. Which country has the best weapons, gadgets, and vehicles? If we're talking about quantities, the USA gets an easy win here, as you'd expect. They spend far more on the military overall, so of course, they have more stuff.
Okay, just to give you, one of the things is, how do you say this? We are, the United States outlook, the military outlook is based on a two-front war. For us, West Coast and East Coast, there's China and there's like a European outbreak. So the idea is that this is not justification, this is just the idea, is that we have to be prepared to fight on two separate fronts, or have, if there's a war in one place, the availability of an army on another place. Such as in World War II, we did have to do that. And so that's what we're ultimately, I guess, prepared for.
The UK only has 227 tanks compared to the USA's 8,370. As for armored vehicles, the UK has 4,673 and the USA has 41,760. Is the UK's lack of resources such a...
Wait, let me just see that.
70. As for armored vehicles, the UK has 4,673 and the USA has 41,760.
Okay, your tanks, by the way, the Challenger, if I'm not mistaken, seems to be a much better tank than our Abrams. And plus, at any given time, about a third of our tanks, and if you're in the American military, correct me on this, but like a third of our tanks are always down for issues. But your Challenger platform is fantastic.
Is the UK's lack of resources such a big
Challenger
deal?
2
Experience
also
shows us that yes it is. During the Afghanistan conflict in 2007, the British Army stationed in the south of the country have been finding it increasingly difficult to maintain peace over the last 3 years because of their lack of equipment. Guess who had to sweep in to save them? The Americans. The U.S. Brigadier General Lawrence Nicholson brought...
Again, I'm sorry for the condescending attitude. Although I didn't make the video, so deal with it from here on in. I'm sorry. That's all I'll say on that, I guess.
4,000 Marines with a new approach. Go big, go strong, go fast. The new forces weren't exactly successful in maintaining peace, as anyone familiar with the Kandahar massacre and the Maiwand district murders will know, but
Yeah.
they were good at going big and going strong, which could give the US an edge in battle. In Afghanistan, the British used Jackal vehicles, which are designed for maneuverability rather than protecting the person inside. The Americans had MRAPs, or mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles.
I've never heard of the
Although
Jackal.
MRAP tanks are classified as light armored vehicles, they weigh a massive 14 to 18 tons and are a lot sturdier than the Jackals, designed to withstand the improvised explosive devices that threatened troops during the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts. They were much more effective at keeping the troops safe from danger than anything the Brits had.
Yeah, see, that's a key. One of the benefits, I mean, in the context, it's horrible, but one of the benefits of being in combat constantly is adaptation, and that's where our MRAPs are from. The idea that, you know, you can explode outward. You know, if you hit an IED, it won't hit the troops on the inside. There's a lot more towards safety of the soldier, which is, I mean, it's always been pretty well on that in terms of military doctrine, but it's nice to see the change because certainly the Hummers weren't that great at that.
However, the U.S. Marines seem to have plenty of admiration for the Brits and what they achieved, despite their
Yes.
lack of equipment. So that's something. One American Marine commented, "The biggest thing I noticed was the vehicles they drive. You guys are friggin' gutsy. I wouldn't get shot at in one of those." Does having more flimsy vehicles make the British the weaker side, or just more badass? It depends on which way you look at it. Another difference between the British and US armies is their deployment of women on the front line. We don't want to say women are better or worse in the military than men, because that'd probably start a war in the comments section, so we'll let you decide, but it's definitely worth mentioning. In Afghanistan, the US Marines were shocked to see women wandering around shower blocks wrapped in nothing but a towel, with no cares in the world. The US does have women in the armed forces, but they aren't always allowed to be on the front line or live in close proximity to their male counterparts. In the UK, on the other hand, women are seen as equals. Revolutionary concept. Despite their surprise at the close working and living relationships between women and men in the British Army, the US Marines soon realized these women were professional soldiers they needed to take seriously. But could the initial shock be a trump card up the sleeves of the British? Anyway, time to get on to the important stuff.
You know, that's interesting that they point that out. I guess, you know, we're here in the States, we're always talking about, like, should we let the, you know, it started out with, like, if you're gay, are you allowed in the military? And then there was this sort of don't ask, don't tell policy. And after that, then it was taken away, and it was, you know, a different way of looking at it. Just said, all right, that's fine. And then now there's this sort of, if you're transgender, you are, you aren't. I don't remember what the ruling is, but to me, it's just stupid. If you want to fight for your country, man or woman, you go right ahead. It wasn't until like the 1990s that we actually let women in combat situations. If there was in the invasion of Iraq, the second Iraq War, there was it Jessica Lynch? She was in charge or driving or part of one of the supply convoys that was, you know, there were like basically two roads to get to Baghdad. And she was captured and taken prisoner. And, you know, one of the reasons they didn't want to do it was, number one, I guess they thought it would take away from the, you know, the fighting abilities, or, you know, the other one is that if you've ever been taken captive, and my wife is always like, you're not going to tell people they're getting raped, but they do things to you that, you know, you don't want to know, that most civilians don't want to know, and it does happen. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, is really good at integration of women into their forces. As a matter of fact, they're one of the Russians were good at it too in World War II. But yeah, the IDF really integrates them well. So it's good to see. It's good to see that. From an American point of view, it's good to see that. So hopefully you take that as a compliment.
The real factors that determine the success of a military side. Who can handle the most alcohol? It's a contentious topic. The British are known for drinking more heavily, and they can start at a younger age, but the US soldiers might give them a run for their money. Around 40% of US soldiers indulge in binge drinking. I know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with the power of their militaries? Although drinking is a skill that might be impressive on a wild night out on the town, it's not a positive thing during combat. It's important for soldiers to keep their mental health stable over extended periods of combat. The soldiers might use alcohol as a way of coping with difficult experiences they encounter during the military instead of talking about them. Over half of British servicemen and women drank at a level that could harm their health in 2018, most likely to self-medicate for a mental health condition such as PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. Similarly, alcohol as a coping mechanism is a huge problem among veterans. Wow, things just got dark. Back to a more lighthearted topic. You can't mention the drinking preferences of the British without mentioning their ultimate beverage of choice, tea.
Yeah, okay. All right, before we do that, on a side note, I had for a while I worked in the jewelry business, and there was a guy in the reserves, and he was called up and went into the 2003 Iraq War. He was gone for 2 years, a year and a half. And, I was just having a conversation with him after he came back. I said, what's the most interesting thing? And he said, he goes, do you know that the Polish troops were rationed vodka on a daily basis? And I was like, oh, I had no idea. As a younger person, that didn't seem like it could be a legitimate thing, but it is. And we have to understand that. And, PTSD is a real thing, and yes, alcoholism is very high, as well as drug use, which they're very careful to tiptoe around, I believe, from veterans.
In contrast, the U.S. prefers coffee. Does this affect the combat performance of either side? Time to find out. Many British tanks and armored vehicles are fitted with water-boiling devices. Cube-shaped kettles enable the troops to boil water inside the protection of a tank and drink tea to their heart's content. Maybe that's why the British were willing to sacrifice the sturdiness of their vehicles in Afghanistan. This might seem a bit eccentric, not to mention pointless, but hear us out. During World War II, a large number of fatalities were caused by crew members having to leave the safety of their tanks when they needed a break. There was only one reasonable solution: let them make a brew inside the tank. That way, the troops were less of a target for enemy fire. 10 out of 10 for ingenuity. Who knows, maybe this could be their secret weapon in a future war. There's nothing like a fresh brew to keep an army going. But don't discount the Americans, because they also seem to recognize the importance of a lovely warm beverage. The U.S. Army aims to ensure coffee is always available to its soldiers, whether in ration packs or at garrisons. Sometimes there are shortages, so improvisation comes into play to give the soldiers their daily fix. During the Korean War, some soldiers indulged in sock coffee filtered using a sock. Or, if the worst comes to worst, they just mix instant coffee granules with cold water and down it like a shot of vodka. Lovely. It's worth it to have that caffeine coursing through your veins ready for battle. Clearly, both sides have their vices, but we'll have to give the Brits the edge on this one, based purely on the fact that they're less likely to drop dead from swallowing some questionable feet fungi. In this capitalist world, soldiers aren't just fighting for their national pride or a noble cause. They also want to receive their paycheck at the end of it all. The draft ended in 1973 after the Vietnam War in the USA, making the Army a professional, career-oriented force. In the British Army, the national service officially ended in 1960, and it transformed into a professional army in 1963. So who gets the fattest check? New recruits?
Okay, so all right, just a real quick thing on the coffee. Yes, Americans love coffee. We drink it more than tea. As a matter of fact, we wake up and a lot of us are like, we need our coffee to get going. I'm that person too, and that's the way we do things. We actually use the tea generally for sort of calming effects. So that's why you see, like, in the mornings, you see a lot of Americans kind of hyper and moving around and stuff. They've had a lot of coffee, and there are a lot of people who throughout the day drink just obscene amounts of coffee. I have a brother who he would make the strongest coffee, and that's just not good for you. I think 1 cup is good. That's wonderful, but anything in excess is, of course, bad, just to say. But also, my understanding, and I don't know where they're going with this about the professional soldiers thing, but again, I've always understood it that the British soldiers were more professional in attitude and career-oriented aspects of things. So I guess we'll see on this particular thing, because I know, like, the SAS and the SBS, they're all Even our SEAL teams say that they're probably the toughest guys that they've come across. Now, as for the military, let's see. I'm not holding a lot to this video, to be honest with you. As I'm getting into it, it's sort of like, I don't know. It's agenda driven, I think, and I do question some things in my head about it, but I'm through it, so let's keep going.
In the British Army start on a salary of £15,985 a year in training, soon going up to $20,400 when becoming a private. After a few years, if they can reach the rank of sergeant, the salary will go up to £35,853 a year. That's around $46,000. In the U.S. Army, new recruits can expect to earn $24,512 a year as a private first class after initial training. A sergeant earns anything up to $29,610 a year. So we have a clear winner here. Let's hope the Americans don't find out, or they could end up switching sides. Now that would be an interesting war.
Okay, so right now I can only speak for the American side of things. Right now, we are, I hope, looking into this. At least, on the American side of things. We basically are at the point of $15 an hour, depending, and it's your choice whether you want to go into the military or work at a fast food restaurant. And there are a lot of things that are taken care of in the military. I'm sort of pushing that out of context, but we're having problems recruiting people as an all-volunteer force to keep up the 1.3 to 1.5 million people in the military, it's becoming a problem. We're not offering as much as we used to, and we kind of have to. I don't know what you guys think about that, about paying the military. Some of you have been in, and how do you feel about that? This is 2021. It has changed, I think, since then. It's now 2023 to July of 2023. So let me know your thoughts down there.
With so much money, you'd hope the British soldiers would go through a half-decent training program. Let's find out if that's the case. In the UK, most soldiers complete a 14-week common military syllabus, followed by specialist training for different trades and divisions. US soldiers train for slightly less time. They complete a 10-week basic combat training course, then complete more career-oriented training. Overall, both countries offer a similar style of training based on fitness, discipline, and weaponry. It's hard to say that one country is definitively superior here, but there is one key difference: the age of the recruits. A U.S. soldier must be 17 to join the forces with parental consent, or 18 without the consent. Meanwhile, Brits can join at the age of 16 if they have parental consent, making the UK the only NATO country to recruit young people into its military at age 16. It's a controversial policy, considering these recruits must remain in the Army until they're 22, and they can't even vote or drink alcohol until they turn 18. With literal boys among them who might have joined the forces as a rash decision, could British soldiers be flakier and less mature than their US counterparts? Or is their youth just a testament to how tough they are? But this is just the beginning. Average soldiers might make up the bulk of the Army, but what about the guys that are really, really well trained? We're talking about elite special forces.
Okay, so one thing about joining when you're 16 and leaving, what is it, when you're 22, if that's correct, that's a 6-year stint, you will have a larger, more, in theory, more veteran, more well-trained force because people are in there longer. Now, I don't know about joining up then for another 6 years or, after that. But again, my only experience is I was at Fort Indiantown Gap for a little bit, not in the service, but I was chatting with a guy who was part of, I don't know what you call them, the Lend-Lease program, if you will, just coming over, looking at supply logistics, which is what we do, and how things work. And he was in for, I guess, something like eight years. Interesting, very interesting guy to talk to. Fun too.
The British Army has the famous SAS, or Special Air Service.
Yeah.
Founded during World War II, it's one of the oldest special forces and has the highest entry requirement of all British forces, with the motto, "Who dares wins." The SAS is respected and feared across the globe in equal measure. It's heavily involved in reconnaissance and counterterrorism, meaning most of their work is below the radar and people like us can't get too nosy about it. However, they do plenty of cool and hardcore stuff, like rescuing hostages. Not to be outdone, the US Army has the highly respected and admired Delta Force, also known as the 1st Special Forces Operation Detachment. Formed in 1977, it's known as one of the most secretive U.S. forces and specializes in counterterrorism and hostage rescue. Sounding familiar yet? Allegedly, the Delta Force was modeled on the British SAS. We want to give the Brits the point here for sheer originality, but it's not exactly good news for them if the Americans know the training secrets and operations of their elite forces. That's a rookie error if there ever was one, especially when there are way more U.S. soldiers and they have better equipment. What about the heads of the armies? The U.S. Army.
All right, I'm stopping right there. First of all, starting at World War II here, our special service, our Ranger groups, we were taught in 1942 by Canadian Special Forces that came right down from Canada, and also British. So I'm just gonna say right off the bat that our special forces, no matter what, is based on the British and the Canadian. As it goes on, it doesn't necessarily matter how well. I mean, it's good to, I guess, we're talking quantity, but there's a lot of quality that goes into the British services, special air service, special boat service, and my understanding is, like, if you see a lot of interviews from people in the SEAL teams or former Delta Force, and you'll talk to these guys afterwards, because after they get out of the military, they end up doing things like, they end up working for companies in security across the globe and whatnot. It's almost always unanimously the British who seem to have the best in terms of where your head's at, which is what it has to be. I mean, where is your head at? And so they always seem to go back and say, no, the British has some of the best special forces. I think probably the most, feared, you get into, like, the Israeli and stuff like that. But the SAS and the SBS, I think almost everybody pretty much agrees. If you've ever worked with them, and I have not, I'm just talking about interviews, they would pretty much say, hands down, they're very they do it for their country. And Americans can say it all they want, but to get in there, it's a high bar.
Army serves the government of the USA, making the President of the U.S. Commander-in-Chief. Meanwhile, the British Army serves Her Majesty the Queen as head of the armed forces, who is also their Commander-in-Chief. Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth is closely tied to the British military, having been a wife, mother, and even grandmother of individuals serving in the armed forces. During World War II, the Queen, who was then Princess Elizabeth, joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service herself and learned to maintain and drive military vehicles and ambulances. She even achieved the rank of Honorary Junior Commander while doing her part for the war effort. By comparison, the current U.S. president, as of this script's writing, claimed to suffer bone spurs when it was his time to serve his country.
Okay, clearly they talk about Trump and, whatever. There's a history of rich people getting into the military, and unfortunately at this point it is now King Charles. I say unfortunately because I was kind of partial to the Queen. I thought she was, I enjoyed her very much, to a certain extent, I did.
Points here for the badass monarch up to her elbow in Greece, fixing combat vehicles and serving her country. Overall, the British and American armies are matched fairly evenly in terms of their training and structure. It doesn't exactly come as a surprise, considering their histories are so closely linked. Realistically, the Americans would likely have the upper hand in any war against the Brits due to sheer manpower and weaponry. But let's hope the two sides can settle their differences over a cup of tea.
Okay, first of all, I don't know. This is such a weird, biased video that I'm just going to say, I don't ever think we're going to go to war, at least not I don't think in my lifetime. I certainly hope not. But, when you talk about things like NATO and what we're doing right now, the operational congruency, the two armies are very much in tune with each other, and we have to, because since Ukraine, number one, the invasion of the Ukraine, NATO has to be very much in tune, and you've got to know how to work with other armies that are out there and other militaries. Excuse me. I do believe that the British is superior, usually a more quality. They've always been, or you guys have always been, a more quality force. The Army, it was sort of like, you don't know what you want to do in the United States military. You don't know what you want to do, you go in there, because it's normally by the age of 18 that you finish you finish high school, and if you don't have a job, or you don't know what you want to do, or you're a misguided youth, you go into the Army. If you are more of a specialist, maybe you go into the Marines if you want to be a little tougher. You can go into the Navy, that's another thing, and of course the Air Force. Those are usually college guys in times of war. I recall when I was in college, the Air Force was recruiting there, not so much the Army. But anyway, I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I way wrong? Am I talking out of my ass? But I don't think there are really that many differences. If anything, I think this video just pisses people off and provides a catalyst to make us feel like there's a difference. That's my final thought. You guys take it easy. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out the memberships. Check out the merch if you're interested. But please do subscribe. I do appreciate it. Hit the thumbs up and the bell if you want to see the next video coming around the pike. Thank you. Bye-bye.